Week 12 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters falling down the rankings this week. The first guy is Chris Bryan of the Chicago Cubs. So Bryan, he got off to an amazing start early in the season here, way better than last season. So on the season for him, 14 home runs, 40 RBIs, 44 runs scored, 4 stolen bases, a 273 batting average, and a 361 on base. But the last couple weeks here, he's hit rock bottom. Is Bryan. 1 home run, 2 RBIs, 4 runs scored, a stolen base, an 081 batting average, and a 244 on base. So right now, he's in a major slump. In the beginning of the year, he was one of the top fantasy players in the first 2 months of the season here for fantasy owners. And Bryan, I think he's going to turn it around. It's a contract season, and some hitters, they just go through peaks and valleys and slumps as the season is a long one, and obviously 162 games where you're not going to be on top of your game each and every day, day in and day out. But the last few games here for Bryan: 18th versus Miami, 0 for 3. June 19th versus Miami, 0 for 3. June 20th versus Miami, 0 for 4. June 21st versus Cleveland, 0 for 2. June 22nd versus Cleveland, 1 for 3 with a homer and 2 runs scored. And June 24th at the Dodgers, 0 for 4 with a run and a stolen base. So right here, Chris Bryan, he's definitely struggling. He's definitely a player falling this week, but he's also a player I think that could get things going and rise right back up on top of the ranking boards this season in fantasy baseball. The next hitter is Pete Alonso of the New York Mets. Pete Alonso, he's had some nagging injuries on and off this season, and he was banged up for a few weeks with a wrist injury, but he's been back now the last couple weeks. He is Pete Alonso, and on the season for him, 11 home runs, 35 RBIs, 31 runs scored, a 250 batting average, and a 335 on base. But the last couple weeks here for Alonso, 1 home run, 4 RBIs, a stolen base, a run scored, 208 batting average, and a 304 on base percentage. So Pete here, to me, it's not a big deal if he's going to have a low batting average, but right now he's not really hitting for power at all. And right now he's only got 11 home runs on the season, which is a low standard for him in 208 at-bats so far in the year we go into the first 2-3 months of the year. So the last few games for Alonso: June 18th at Washington, 0 for 3. June 19th at Washington, 2 for 6. June 20th at Washington, 1 for 4 with a homer and an RBI. June 21st at Atlanta, 2 for 6 in the doubleheader. June 22nd, he sat out. June 23rd, 1 for 4 versus Atlanta and versus Philly. June 25th, in the first game of the doubleheader, 1 for 2 with a stolen base. So right now, he's just not hitting up for power. He's not really driving in runs, and he's a little bit of a disappointment so far this season for the Mets and fantasy owners who expected a little more right now from Alonso here, 12 weeks in, and he's definitely a hitter falling this week. The next hitter falling this week is Nolan Arenado of the St. Louis Cardinals. So it's Arenado's first season, obviously, in St. Louis after spending his whole career with the Colorado Rockies. And on the season for Arenado, pretty decent numbers: 14 homers, 48 RBIs, 35 runs scored, a 264 batting average, which is low for him, even though last season was the lowest for him, a 253, where we usually see him hit 300 or above, and a 314 on base. In the last couple weeks for Arenado, 3 homers, 8 RBIs, 3 runs scored, but a 167 batting average and a 222 on base percentage. So maybe there was some truth that Coors Field obviously pumped his numbers up and obviously made the home runs, RBIs, and hits go up for Arenado. But his home runs are still at a decent pace, in my opinion, with 14 and 48 RBI. So I think he still could finish the season a 30 and 100 season. But right now the batting average is low. Right now the power is going down, obviously, here for Nolan Arenado. But I think he's a player that's going to get things going and definitely bounce back. So the last few games for him: June 18th at Atlanta, 0 for 3. June 20th at Atlanta in a doubleheader, 3 for 6 with a homer and 3 RBIs. June 22nd at Detroit, 0 for 4. June 23rd at Detroit, 1 for 4 with a homer and a rib. And June 24th versus Pittsburgh, 0 for 3. So right now, we'll see what Arenado could do in the next couple weeks. But right now, he's definitely falling. He's not hitting the baseball, but I think he'll bounce back and get things going. The next hitter falling this week was Abreu with the Chicago White Sox. So last season, the AL MVP was Abreu with a monster season for the White Sox. But so far this season, it's been a mixed bag of results. 12 home runs, 53 RBIs, which is definitely up there amongst the top 10 in RBIs in the league. 33 runs scored, a stolen base, a 242 batting average, and a 318 on base. So his batting average is way down from last season for Abreu, where last season he had 240 at-bats, and this season 256. But right now he's striking out more. Average is way down, like I mentioned, 75 points. And the last couple weeks for him, 1 homer, 5 RBIs, 4 runs scored, 200 batting average, and a 245 on base percentage. So right now, the only positive for Abreu for me is obviously he's driving in a lot of runs still, even though he did a lot of the damage the first few weeks of the season. And right now, he's in a total slump. He's not getting many hits, and he's not even been driving in much runs in the last 2 weeks here, with only the 5 RBIs to the last few games for Abreu. June 18th at Houston, 1 for 3 with an RBI. June 19th at Houston, 0 for 4. June 20th at Houston, 0 for 3. June 22nd at Pittsburgh, 1 for 4 with a run. June 23rd at Pittsburgh, 0 for 4. So a lot of offers in there in the last week here for Abreu. But Abreu, we know he's a great hitter. We know he was an MVP last season. And I don't think it was a fluke at all, in my opinion. I think he's going to get things going, pick it back up. And like I said, at least his RBIs are right there. And the batting average in the 240s, he could still raise that up as the season goes on. But right now, as week 12 is going on here, he's definitely a hitter. Falling this week, and the 5th and final hitter falling is Charlie Blackmon of the Colorado Rockies. So Charlie Blackmon, he's more of a second half player, I feel like, throughout his career here. He's Blackmon. And now with Nolan Arenado not in that lineup, is a guy to drive them in and protect them as well down in the order. And Trevor Story's struggling for the most part of the season. The numbers are definitely down for Blackmon on the season. 4 home runs, 37 RBIs, only 29 runs scored, a 262 batting average, and a 368 on base percentage. In a couple weeks for him, no homers, 4 RBIs, 4 runs scored, an abysmal 179 batting average, and a 340 on base percentage. So right here, it's been a total struggle for Blackmon. We know he's a 300 hitter, and we know he's got some power, even though I know last season he only hit 6 home runs, and this year only with 4. So right now, his power's taking a step back over the last couple of years. But the batting average last year was still great at 303. And right now, this season, it's down there at 262. And he's been slumping mightily, like I mentioned, in the last couple of weeks. But I think Blackmon could still get things going. The weather's obviously getting nicer. And right now, he's too good of a professional hitter for him in one season to totally take a hit and his numbers go down in the average category, down 40 or 50 points. So right now, he's definitely falling as Blackmon. But I think he'll raise back up in the last couple games for him. June 18th versus Milwaukee, 0 for 4. June 19th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs. June 20th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 5 with a run. June 22nd at Seattle, 0 for 4. June 23rd at Seattle, 0 for 1 with a run. And June 25th at Milwaukee, 1 for 3 in that game. So right here, like I mentioned, he's not getting many hits, a couple offers in there. But I think he'll bounce back. But right now, he's a hitter falling, and that's a few hitters falling here in Week 12 of the fantasy baseball season.